Oh, we live. All right. What's going on, y'all? This is we are live from Talk That Real Shit. I'm your girl, your cousin, Tanisha Peoples, live from Chicago with my co-hosts, my homeboys, my brothers, Jason Allen in Atlanta, Nehemiah Frank repping Tulsa, and today we have a very special guest, y'all. Listen. Listen. I can't say enough about Carmita Semaan. Like I could say that she literally swooped in and saved my life, and I am so happy that she's on our show today. So I'm gonna give y'all a little bit of background about Carmita. She's originally from Birmingham, Alabama, and her Black girl magic was cultivated and nurtured by a village of supportive adults, most notably her mother, Wanda Burnett. Yes, got a shout out to the moms. Yes, yes, yes. So she attended public school in Birmingham, and she was an honor student, attended the University of Michigan and graduated with a degree in chemical engineering. She also studied at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern and completed the Broad residency. She served in a number of leadership positions on the corporate and nonprofit side, and today she is the founder and president of Surge Institute, in which I am a proud fellow, represent the Resurgence 2020 cohort. Shout out to my family. So y'all give it up for Carmita. All that said, I just ran down like a snippet of her resume, but all that said, she is the shit, y'all. So y'all give it up for Carmita. Thank her for joining us on Talk That Real Shit today, and we are indeed go talk that shit. Carmita, how you doing? How you doing today?
I am honored, blessed, full. I appreciate you. I don't know where you found out some of that stuff. I was like, where'd she get that bio? I appreciate you. But I think like so many of us right now, I'm full. I feel heavy. I feel a lot. So I'm excited to be here just to talk and be with family. You know, you already family, and now I got two new play cousins. So we can just go wherever we go, talk about whatever we want. But I'm just blessed to be in community with y'all.
Yeah, amen, amen.
I'm full. I feel heavy. I feel a lot. So
I'm sorry, y'all. I had some feedback in the background going on. It's a Monday indeed. But Jason and Neil, how y'all doing today?
I would say I'm just like our sister here. I feel heavy. The death of Representative, now ancestor, John Lewis has hit me in so many different ways. One minute I feel one way, another minute I feel another way. I'm like, who's going to replace him in Congress? There's this whole drama going on. Jason can probably tell you about it because he's from Atlanta. But there's a lot of stuff mixing around with that as well. But also, the death of this young white dude that was in San Antonio who was pushing his fiance was struck by a vehicle and then shot. So we're still dealing with all of these things. I mean, from Bloody Sunday all the way to, these advocates and activists out on the streets getting hurt. It's just, it's sad that we're still dealing with this as John Lewis is getting ready to rest.
Yeah. I think, you know what? I think we all have the same feeling today. Like, we watched the procession, and I thought it was interesting that John Lewis is only the second Black person to be buried in the Washington Rotunda, and then they were talking about how slaves built it. And so that was fucking with me a little bit. But before we get into our conversation today, I think it's appropriate. I've been disconnected this weekend, so I don't know like what else was going on. So I kind of want to ask y'all, if it's anything that we want to cover. And specifically, Carmita, we've asked all of our other guests about how they feel about Kanye running for president. At this point, I'm kind of indifferent about. I ain't trying to feed into the conversation anymore. But I just want to give you the opportunity to chime in if you want to. So. What happened this weekend that we need to talk about? If it's nothing, then we can get right into it. And Carmita, you can say something about our lost brother Ye, if you want to go
ahead. I was actually, so complete aside, but you told me we can go there. I did my first, I ate on a patio this weekend for the first time since March. And I counted the number of people on the patio that were wearing Yeezys. And there were a number of them, but none of them were Black people. So I didn't feel comfortable going to have the conversation about, their support of the brand. But here's let me say, and you know this about me, Tanisha, I am so focused on the liberation of our people that I try not to get caught up in the distractions. Right. I think there are so many things that are brought forward to distract us from the real goal. And I, as a person who is a strong advocate for mental health, and I've been public about my own mental health struggles, I pray for that brother. And I think that there's a lot that's likely happening with him that needs to be addressed personally and deeply with him and his family. But in terms of him running for president, y'all, come on, for real. We really gonna spend time on that? I think it's a distraction, and I think it's a tool that the enemy continues to use to keep our folks not focused on what we should be.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we all feel that, and I ask because I think it's important for, especially our young folks, to see, at least leaders in the community, maybe even some, people that they respect, elders, whomever, say y'all make informed decisions. Just because y'all like Yeezys or y'all like, the college dropout, don't mean that Kanye should be president, and we need to stay focused on the goal, which is getting Trump's ball head out. So that's why I wanted, I want to ask people their opinions about Kanye, because again, people need to keep hearing over and over, this ain't where we should go. This ain't where it is, y'all. But y'all, real quick, Jason got some internet issues, so we go, hopefully he can rejoin us soon. Y'all lay hands on his internet. Lay hands on his internet so we can so he can get back in this good conversation.
Sometimes I'm a heathen. My prayers don't always get straight through. So it might be
gotta be tested. They gotta be rinse it off first. I feel you. I'm a heathen too. A clock starting in the chat. She said she's not here for Biden either. Yeah, that's a. I mean, a lot of us ain't here for Biden, but it's if we ain't here for Biden, then who else? I mean, it's either Biden, him, or Trump at this point. It's a shame, but we ain't gonna spend too much time on that, because I think, again, the important conversation is, and the topic of the conversation today is leading while Blackity Black. And with, us feeling heavy about John Lewis's passing, and, as activists and leaders trying to figure out, what we need to do more, and, just really pick up the torch. It's important to have this conversation, because it's one thing to lead while Black. I think that a lot of people have been able to lead while Black, but leading while Blackity Black, to me, takes courage, and that's underestimated. And so, Carmita, I'm glad that you're here today to talk about leading while Blackity Black, leading in authenticity and in purpose, and leading in I said what the fuck I said. So if you can kind of talk about, how you came to this idea that I need to create this organization to cultivate Black and brown leaders of color in education, and, so they can continue to impact this work. If you could tell us a little bit about how you got there and how you navigate this space, where our voices are often shunned. Yeah.
I mean, so, you mentioned at the start that I'm from Birmingham, which frankly tells you more about me than what school I went to or what damn degrees I have or whatever. I'm Birmingham through and through. And what I mean by that is a number of people have heard me say before, and I just came to this realization, honestly, over the past 6 or 7 years, that one of the great benefits that I had growing up in Birmingham is that, and in the family that I was in particularly, is that whiteness was never an aspiration for me. And I didn't even know I frankly didn't even know to call it that. Because in Birmingham, I was surrounded by Blackness, and Blackness across the spectrum, right? So My AP, my AP chemistry and physics teachers were Black men, and the janitor was Black, right?
Mhm.
Our principals were Black. Our mayor was Black. So I was surrounded by this idea of Black excellence as not being exceptional, right? Like not being something that was for a chosen few or elite, because I was poor as hell, right? Like, and part of why this connects to education is because my story is that education was communicated to me as what would liberate me. It was, I had great privilege in some sense in that I was not the first person in my family to go to college. There were, I had aunts and uncles who went to college, and my paternal grandfather went to college, all of that. But because of a lot of bad luck and health issues, my mom and I ended up, well below the poverty line, living in public housing, homeless here or there, though, we ain't call it homeless. We were just staying with somebody, that kind of stuff in our community. But the thing that was consistent was education. Like she just drilled into me. It's like, that's the one thing nobody can take away from you. It won't guarantee that they won't try you, but it's the thing they can't take away. And so it was always communicated to me that that was going to be my liberator. And I didn't realize that having that message coupled with so much Blackness around me made me bold. Like it made me think about myself and think about my people in a very different way. But it also, frankly, made me naive, because a lot of what other people see me doing or saying, or the ways in which I am in the world, they assume that it's courage that fuels that. And sometimes it's just naivete, frankly, because I don't know any better. Like I don't know to be scared when I walk in the room, because I was taught that if I'm in the room, I'm supposed to be there, right? And it's probably not PC to say this, but what I heard from my mom is that if I'm in the room with white folks, I had to work harder to get there. So like I'm more than deserve to be in those rooms. So that's just tells you a little bit about like what makes me tick and my story, that I think explains more about why Surge was the thing for me. I didn't set out to be an entrepreneur, quite honestly. I'm not a person who always dreamed of starting my own thing. I am a problem solver. So when I started working in education, it came from a deeply personal place. I moved to Chicago 18 years ago, and I saw what was happening in Chicago, and I was like, I can't just volunteer on the weekends or give money. Like I actually got to get in the game. And when I started working in education, I was haunted, and I use that word really intentionally. I was haunted by the lack of our people in positions of power, and not that we weren't there, but that power matters. Like the more I went up the ladder in certain spaces, when I got to the rooms where people were making real decisions about where the money went, the policies, and all things that impact our young people. And the reason I got into the work, it's like, oh, not only are there very few of us, and that's Black and brown folks, but specifically for me, I was thinking Black folks. But the other thing that I was carrying with me, and me and my therapist gonna keep working on this, was this poor Black girl chip on my shoulder, right? It was, not only are there few of us, but I would often feel like, and ain't nobody else in this room ever lived out of a garbage bag like I had to. Like nobody else in this room ever had their stuff on the front porch because they got evicted, and that matters because a lot of the assumptions that were being made about our children, about our communities, were so rooted in deficits that even well-meaning activity, well-meaning policies, well-meaning strategies are rooted in this savior complex, and not rooted in the genius that already exists within our young people. So Surge was my response to that. Like I'm a problem solver at my core. One of the things that I learned from my mama was don't talk about it, be about it. Like you can't be out here saying that you really for liberation and you really for revolution and you sitting comfortable in your legacy and not trying to actually do something about it. So for me, Surge was, it came at a time where I had spent a lot of time trying to support and pull folks up to certain tables that I was invited to. And I realized like this will take forever. We just got to create new tables.
Yes.
But the other piece I'll say, and then I'll stop, is like, it's not just about getting to the table though. And that actually is what fueled what Surge looks and feels like in the experience. It's like, if we aren't healed, if we haven't done our work when we get to the table, we will get to the table and be so happy to be there that we're either silent and complicit, or we start to become corrupted by the space that we fought so hard to get to. So Surge was like, it can't just be about getting to the table. It's got to be about doing our work so that we walk in our power and our strength. So when we're at the table, we make that place different because we're there.
And that's, if I can, first of all, let's give all praises to God because Jason is back. But if I can, I just want to provide a quick testimony real quick. And this is, a Surge testimonial, because I was one of those people on the opposite side of Carmita, what you talked about, when we, you grow up and this standard of white excellence is what we subscribe to and what we strive to attain. And so you're happy to be in the room and that, but at the same time, you've been conditioned to believe that your voice doesn't matter. Just be happy to be there, and that you're unintelligent and all these other things, and so you just sit there and you just shut the fuck up, just happy to have a space, and so my testimonial is that Surge helped me find that voice, where I come into these rooms and I'm like, again, I'm gonna say what I need to say, and if you like it, great. If you don't like it, oh well, and to me that takes courage, and so it's made me more courageous in my mission and, in my passion and my fight for my people. So I just want to, thank y'all for that and say, again, Surge is the deal. But a lot of us, I think, come from that side of being silenced and being okay with being silenced and, just accepting our place in the room, but not needing to necessarily have a voice at the table and not feeling like we should have a voice at the table. And so to have that voice, to be in a room and have that voice is critically important.
But can I say something to you, sister,
okay.
Which is, you already had that voice. Like, this is the thing. People ask me about the secret sauce that is Surge and all this stuff. And what I tell people all the time is, we do not develop or groom talent. We identify genius that is already within our people. And like my calling, I know my calling, part of it at least. I'm scared of the other part of it. We'll get to that in a different show. But is to be a mirror for my people. Like what you needed, Tanisha, was to hear somebody, like to have somebody force you to sit still and look in the mirror and actually sit with yourself. Like sit with your brilliance and your genius and not let you run away from it, which is what you were doing.
Ooh,
right?
I was running. I was on the run.
And I think that's the powerful testimony, because while I love Surge and clearly I put my heart and soul and all my savings and all that stuff into making it happen, it's not the thing. Like, it is a vehicle for people to actually live into who they were already called to be. And sometimes we just need to hear that. Like, we need to actually have it affirmed. Versus having it squelched and shut down, which is what so many of the systems and institutions that we are in is what they're designed to do, frankly.
It feels seen. Having that feeling is important. Did y'all want to chime? Jason, welcome back.
Hey, y'all.
Back to the conversation. Glad to see
you. Maybe
I had to make a run too. Yeah, so I'm in a different location and I'm like, oh my God, I'm used to having like the ancestors right behind me, and it's like now they're not there. But the internet on my street went out. So thank God my sister lives around the corner. So I came right over here and said, let me get back connected. So yes, I'm happy to be back.
How serious this shit is for Jason. He ran around the corner to his sister's house.
Literally, I really did. I really did.
But did Jason Neo, did y'all want to chime in on that? Did y'all have any of those experiences with feeling like y'all in the room and weren't being heard and whatever? Like, did y'all want to comment on what Carmita said?
You know,
Oh, go ahead, Neo.
so this is where I'm at. Like, I think the reason why I was invited into the room was because I spoke my truth all the time. And so because I spoke my truth before I got into these rooms or on boards, I think that people that were already on these boards or in these positions of influence and power say, you know what, there's somebody that's going to tell the truth. So let's pull them up to the table. At least that's what I hoped, right? Because you never know. Somebody could pull you up there to try to silence you because now you got a seat at the table.
Right.
But yeah, that's been my experience, is just speaking my truth. My convictions always get the best of me, and I have to go with whatever's in my heart. So what about you, Jason?
So I can agree with that. I've had similar situations, and I think a lot of times people are dependent on that. They need for someone who's going to speak truth to knowledge, who's going to bring a different sense of urgency about things that need to happen into the room, because everybody doesn't have that. I think that I try to be very intentional about what I'm called to do and doing that. And I know that a lot of people struggle with that because in our minds, we think that everyone should think the way that we think, have the same views. And that's really not what society and what life is about. So I say all that to say that finding your voice is important. And I think that I'm sorry, I'm looking in the chat and it threw me off. But I think that it's important for everyone to find their voice, no matter what medium you're using it on.
But because one of the things that I've struggled with, and especially with us working in this space, right? And Carmita, this ties into your Chalk B article and just conversation periods, that we work in a space that is heavily riddled with agendas, right? And so you get into these spaces and you have again your mission and your values, and it's like, I'm sticking to this shit. But then sometimes you have these organizations that just want your face, as like to represent the movement, but they don't have any interest in investing in your mission and values and all that stuff in your voice. So how have y'all worked to maintain again that authentic voice in these spaces that don't give a damn about what you're talking about?
I feel like I show up regardless if I have a seat at the table or not. Whether it's an open meeting, whether it's a closed door, I make the door open, I make myself available so my voice can be in the place. Unfortunately, even in right now in Atlanta, I'm switching to this only because I feel like it connects. We have the issue with the youth that now, per the city council president's recommendation, because I don't want her coming after me anymore. Regarding that, let me say that because I don't want her to be watching and say, now you saying I'm coming after you. But she, made a recommendation for these youth to be detained. And I was so disappointed by that because even before her work as the council president, I watched her voice and I watched her be in rooms where we needed someone to advocate for all people, but specifically our Black and brown citizens in lower income, striving, working, upper class communities. And so I was very disappointed when she made that recommendation because a lot of these youth are selling these waters because they're trying to survive and they don't know how to use their voices. So they are depending on us to use ours. And we are learning that we can't rely on Black elected officials, unfortunately, even those on school boards, those who are, chained by the Republican Party, and then they are locked by the Democratic Party. So they are confined to what they can say and they can do. So us as grassroots, nonprofit, educational activists, it's up to us to lift our voices to make sure that everyone's heard. Yeah. I know it was a little long, y'all, but I needed a little time to talk anyway.
No, you good. You good. Neo, do you have something?
I mean, so to the water bottles, let's talk about that for just 1 second. So y'all know I just got here to Atlanta. Just driving around, there are kids, babies selling water bottles everywhere on all of the corners. And so it reminded me of the time when I went to New Orleans, the drummer boys that be out in the streets with the buckets that drum for cash. I'm just like, dang, like where and how and why are they, how did they get to that situation? And I feel like, oh, it's a society that has failed them. We failed them as a society. And then some people maybe they see it as just kids out trying to make some extra cash. But I mean, these kids, they're making money. Like they have to, and why do they feel that that's the only way that they can make money? Probably because it's the only way that they can. You know, I feel really bad for those babies out there.
Well, I'll say, and we got a whole lot of the water bottle babies up here in Chicago too. Here's what I think. And this may sound a little disjointed, but I think we all have to choose our fight. Like we all have to choose what it is that we're going to fight for and go all in on it. And that might change from time to time or that sort of thing. And the reason I have to remind myself of that is our people have been marginalized and disinvested in across so many different, in so many different arenas, across so many different structures and institutions. Like you would kill yourself trying to fight it all at the same time, right? So part of what I try to do is build a tribe of people around me who are complementing my fight, right? So I'm when I see the water bottle, when I see them selling the water bottles, I immediately go to your point, what are the systems that have actually led to this young person having to be out here? Like, because, we want to criminalize and demonize our babies, but it's like, there is a logical reason that they are out here, right? So how do I actually take my position, whatever privilege I have, my access, my whatever, to actually fight those systems? And I gotta believe that there's other people who are gonna be on the front lines helping to actually fight to make sure that those boys aren't arrested and all that kind of stuff. But I can't actually take my eye off this system fight because I gotta lean into, the other players in our eco village that are going to be doing that work. Like Tanisha has heard me talk about this all the time. I think one of, particularly with the passing of Reverend Vivian and John Lewis, we're all thinking about the roles that we have to play. And I think I'll speak for myself and saying like feeling unworthy of standing on their shoulders, like we're not doing enough and all of that. But when I think about comparisons to where we are now, and where they were, there are a couple things that I think are really important to acknowledge. One is that they played the long game, right? Like long game. So you're talking about from 1954 to the Civil Rights Act not being passed until 1964, and then the Voting Rights Act being passed in 1965. And then the Fair Housing Act being passed in 68. Like this is chess, not checkers.
Right.
So I think that's important to acknowledge that we got to be in it for the long haul. And we got to recognize that the war is fought on many fronts. And so we got to have enough people out here, enough soldiers who are attacking all of these different systems if we really want to see the kind of transformational change that we know our people deserve.
That's good.
But let me see, I'm glad because we all here today on a Monday. I'm glad that, we're talking about this because it's a question that I want to ask. Like, Carmita, we've seen a lot of protests around removing the Columbus statues in Chicago, and Lori took them down and, really to preserve them and not because of the protests from what, we've seen in media. And, the Italians are pissed and the Black people, they happy they still kicking it, in front of Lori House. They had a whole ass block party in front of Lori House. Y'all
Did you see that cha-cha? Did you see the cha-cha slide?
I did. And did you see them remix YMCA talking about fuck CPD? That shit was hilarious. But they've been cutting up in Chicago, y'all. But I'm looking at all these different efforts, right? And me personally, the removal of the statues is not my priority. Painting Black Lives Matter on streets is not my priority. But everyone has their advocacy and activism. But my question is, in this movement, in this opportune moment, what are our priorities, and are we mobilizing around those? Have we identified our priorities as a people, and are we adequately mobilizing around those priorities? Because I don't know if I see it, honestly.
I don't know if I see it either.
Can I say, okay, you know where I'm going with this, Tanisha.
I'm gonna follow you.
So I have to separate that. I'm just gonna speak for myself. I have to separate my priorities from the priorities of the movement overall, right? Because I know I have a role to play based on my gifts, based on my interests, based on my priorities, based on my risk tolerance, based on all this stuff, right? So I agree with you. Like I tell folks all the time, going to paint Black Lives Matter on streets, that's not my ministry. But that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Like, it is actually a necessary action. And, I break this down. Like, there's a researcher at Harvard, I'm forgetting her first name right now, but Batalania, who broke down in successful social justice movements, their three main actors. And I sort of did a whole bunch of research and remixed a little bit, because, that's what Black folks do, to use some of my own language, which is, you got to have agitators, you got to have infiltrators. She called them innovators. I think of it a little bit differently. And you got to have orchestrators. So your agitators, you got to have people out there in the streets, right? Because they have to wake up the people who are sleeping.
Right.
Like, those of us who are already conscious, that may or may not be where we want to fight, right? It may be like, okay, that's not for us, because we didn't need George Floyd to die to know that they was killing Black men, right? Like, and it's good that there is a heightened national consciousness about what we have known. But we have to recognize that there may not have been that heightened consciousness if we didn't have people out there on the streets painting, doing all that stuff. And so God bless them, they got to do that.
Right.
But you also got to have people who are willing to actually get in the fight in these systems. Like, they are willing to either take the job in the system they're trying to dismantle. They are willing to go to the meetings and actually be called all kinds of names and be, public enemy number 1, 2, 3, whatever. Like, they're willing to actually be in those systems, which is a different kind of risk. It's a different risk than being on the street. Right. Like, it's a reputational risk. It's a financial risk. It's a mental and emotional health risk, because you got to put yourself in there with the people that you're trying to change, which is very different than being an outside agitator trying to be the catalyst for them to understand that change is necessary. And then finally, you got your people who are orchestrators. And those are the folks who are behind the scenes. I think about these as like those puppet masters, but not necessarily in a negative way, right? But like, they may have access to the dollars. They may have access, like they have a vision that's like, let me see how we can get all these people working together, some of whom may outwardly disagree. But if we all agree on the end goal, there's work we can do to make sure that we realize what we're actually fighting for. And so I say all that to say, that's what I mean when I say I got to separate my calling from what I think the entire movement should be doing. Like, I don't feel the desire to do a lot of stuff just for optics, right? Like, because that's not, I don't need that validation. I'm beyond that. Like, if anybody's still questioning whether I'm Black enough, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. I don't need that, But I know that I will have the most impact in different ways, because I can get into rooms that lots of people can't get into. And I'm going to be in those rooms and risk not being asked back. in order to tell the truth in those spaces. So I think it's not as simple as should this be our priority or not. I think we got to think about it strategically around like, what again are those, like, what are the multiple fronts that we have to fight on? Who needs to be fighting in what front? And how do we collaborate so that we're not so busy demonizing each other? Because that's what that's how we get. It's like, you choose to fight somewhere that's not where I choose to fight. Somehow you ain't woke or you ain't down enough or whatever. And the truth of the matter is, the way these movements happen, like I was actually just talking to somebody this weekend about, if you look at the progress of the LGBTQ movement over the past decade, that shit was surgical, right? It was like, we gonna operate on so many fronts, and we need to be learning from our brothers and sisters, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, this is like, we got to attack this on so many different fronts. And we got to know that means that some people going to be working inside that system that you're trying to dismantle, but you got to know that they're on your side too. Some people, all of that. So I went on this, Jason, this was my time to go a little long, but you know how I feel about this.
No, that was good. And I hate I don't have my notebook because I wanted to take notes, but I'm going to remember that.
I agree. I completely, y'all know it's my job to start trouble, to start shit, be the devil's advocate on the show, so I gotta.
Yeah, but that's good though.
You be good trouble.
I think it was a good point too, realizing that there are going to be people that are in the system working to help dismantle and make change. And even in education, I've been in that same position, and you have to do what's necessary because, to be honest, even though there are people that look like us in those positions, they may not necessarily lift their voice to speak the truth because at the end of the day, people are always going to look at, and I like how you broke down your priorities and then the priorities of the movement. And to be honest, the movement isn't a priority for everyone. So, I just think that's important for people to remember too, that when you see people out there lifting their voices, stand with them. Like, you got to support that because everyone isn't called or able to do that.
Yeah. And can I say, Tanisha, somebody asked me last week, they asked me about where I thought Surge would be in 20 years, right? Mm-hmm. And I think they were a little shocked by the answer because I was like, if we are on the takeover shit we say we're on, Surge shouldn't have to exist in 20 years. Mm-hmm. I didn't build this organization with help from a lot of other people. Like, we didn't build this as an institution that needs to, last forever and ever. We built it to solve a problem.
Right.
I think that and the reason I'm connecting this to what you're saying, Jason, is I think the reason that the person was, well, I don't want to assume why they might have been surprised, but based on other conversations I've had, sometimes we get so, can I go there? Yes.
Yeah, go there.
We get so enamored with the position, with the title, with the power, that we forget why we're there in the first place. Yes. Right? Yes. And sometimes the whole goal is to relinquish that power, right? Yes. Your whole goal should be to work yourself out of a job to actually make sure that power is distributed to where it should be, whether that's with students, whether that's with, grassroots organizers, whatever. And I think what often happens, and part of the guidance that I try to give folks all the time is like, we have to learn how to navigate systems without being corrupted by them if we have any chance of dismantling them.
That's good.
Because otherwise we just become the things that we're fighting against.
Right? Yes. You preaching today.
That is what happens.
And I didn't even have none of this brown liquor behind me. I'm drinking right now.
If you did have some bourbon or anything in that cup, we wouldn't trip. I mean, hey, we old as adults, we do hard work. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, but
it's self-care.
Yes.
I love that. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah. And Jason, I'm glad that you mentioned that because and Carmita, to your point, like, realistically, and I said this on another show, nobody was 17 years old talking about I want to be an activist. You know, realistically, if we didn't have to fight these fights that drain us physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, all that stuff, we wouldn't have to, but we have to. You know, and as an organizer, I've always been told to organize yourself out of a job. And so our job is to teach others how to be leaders and do this work. And at some point we won't have to do it anymore. At some point we reach our goals and we have that liberation. So I appreciate that answer. I didn't know what to expect, but I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Well, you know, real talk, when I founded, and you know some of this story, Tanisha, but in the early days when I was shopping Surge around and I was saying to folks, and now it seems like completely in vogue, you know, like to say, yes, we're going to invest in Black and brown leaders. But in 2012, wasn't nobody checking for that. In fact, people were like, are you going to say that to white people? Like, you think they actually going to let you do that? But the thing that we don't talk about, and I'm just going to say it here because you said we keep it real and we're going to go there, is as much, there were lots of external pressures to have Surge not happen. Some of them were the obvious ones, right? The, you know, white people who were scared and folks who didn't want race to be as prominent and didn't want me to be explicit and all that sort of stuff. But there are also old guard folks in our communities that are like, but you ain't kissed nobody's ring and done this and that and da 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 da. So I literally, one of the reasons why I had to empty savings accounts and do all this other stuff and rely on so many amazing people in my village to do shit for free is because I chose to do it completely untethered to any other organization. And that was necessary to me because I didn't want to fall into the trap that so many of us, even when we're trying to do good work, fall into. Which is, okay, I got to actually align myself with some of these status quo organizations or leaders that, again, I'm not saying there's any malicious intent, but they're not thinking of working themselves out of jobs. They're not thinking of working their organizations to a place where they need not exist. They're thinking about sustaining whatever power, influence, position that they have. And that's just not where my soul is, right? And so I couldn't align myself. Like I always say, don't let your ego take you where your values can't sustain you. Like I'm grown enough to be at a point where it's like, I can't align myself with something that I know is not right. It is not well. And that doesn't mean I wish ill on anybody else, but I'm in a different place. And that means we got to be ready to pass the torch and see the power if we want to realize the vision we have for our folks.
I think that is so important that you said pass the torch, because I think that's the biggest issue with the old guard is like they're so used to, not all of them, because you know we got some good folks out there in the community that are teaching us and passing the torch, but there's a lot of us that aren't passing the torch. And when we say old guards, that's older Black folks in the community who may have been an alderman or a city council person that isn't necessarily ready to share that.
Senators that have been around for 20 years.
Right. Been around forever. So, and it needs to happen. It needs to happen all the time. So.
Right. But even the impact of that, like a lot of these people are, you know, in these positions, and it's so funny about kissing the ring, because I used to always admire community activists who would say that in meetings and just would be so nonchalant because they are so focused on doing what's best for the people instead of having to kiss the ring. And I think that even with people doing that, like I can look in my mind and see so many people that I know who have done that, but it's at a cost, because what are you doing now? Like, what impact are you making in our community? We should not be having some of the issues that we're seeing in our communities with this many Black elected officials and this many Black, you know, CEOs of large companies and all this, you know, clout that we claim that we have. We should be much further along with our communities than we're seeing. And it's disheartening because people choose to either kiss the ring or not.
See, that I think, Jason, we cannot underscore enough. And this is, you know, I try to use the opportunities I have. People come to me for coaching and advice and they just want to talk. It's so crazy. Like when you start to get to the point where you realize people consider you an elder, I'm like, what? But it's real, you know, to the young people, it's like you way old and over the hill. But one of the things that I just think can't be said enough, Jason, is I have to remind people there is a cost. Like there is a cost to speaking your truth. There is a cost to not kissing that ring. And if you are not grounded in who you are, whose you are, and who you're there to serve, you will easily be distracted.
That's good.
And I think it's important to know that when you stay grounded in that, that's not going to be everybody's jam. And therefore, there will be rooms that you aren't invited to. And they may be those Black rooms that you want to be in, right? But they may be the rooms with the folks of color who are all the bright, shiny folks of color in the city that you're like, but hey, I'm fighting for our people. And you got to be okay with that. Like, you got to actually go into this work knowing that if you are fighting against status quo, you are going to ruffle feathers. You are going to hear things said about you that are untrue. You are all of that stuff. And you can't let it knock you off your square. You have to be prepared for it and know that, like I say all the time, I just said this on that on Cole's podcast last week, which is dogs don't chase parked cars. Like, you don't see a dog chasing a car that's just sitting there, right? So if folks are coming after you is because you're on the move, and you got to be prepared for that. So I think that's particularly important for our young revolutionaries, our young freedom fighters, because if we don't let them know the cost that comes along with this work, then we are actually doing them a disservice. We have to let them know not only what we are prepared to do and how well we're doing it, but what we've sacrificed in order to do that. And you just got to be okay with it.
Yeah. And I just wanted to real quick shout out to the homie Charles Cole, who Carmita was on Howard University last week with him and Dr. Fuller. So we keep these circles tight, y'all, in these conversations. So again, shout out to Dr. Charles Cole. Just to piggyback off that, because when we're talking about sacrifice, and I really did want to get to this piece that you wrote, Carmita, because I think it's important to have this conversation and any threat that it poses to the Black Lives Matter movement. When you were talking about, well, the name of the piece is called "Leading a Nonprofit Through This Racial Reckoning is More Complicated If You're Black," and so we're talking about being, Blackity Black and a leader of an organization, but also facing repercussions if you're too outspoken as a Black person. If you speaking out against the injustice, but then on the flip side, you have white organizational leaders saying, "Oh yes, Black lives do really matter," and then they getting kudos and shit. And so, what threat does that pose? And it ties into my constant annoyance with everybody again jumping on this Black Lives Matter mindset, as if Emmett Till wasn't lynched, as if George Floyd was the first Black person to die. So what threat does that pose to the movement when, there's this public outcry, but then there's still these behind the scenes practices that keep us oppressed?
Well, thank you for plugging the piece. Appreciate you. But this goes back to, what our brother said earlier, which is, so I felt the need to write that because I know that I have privilege in this moment. And my privilege comes from the fact that I have always been talking this way, right? So for me to talk this way, none of my funders are surprised. Nobody is discontinuing any check writing from Surge or any of that, because I've always been very clear and have not sanitized any of the language around who we are, what we do, or why we do it. I am not, however, I'm aware of the fact that many of our folks don't have that privilege. They have had to sanitize their language. They have had to talk about things in polite ways. And what I started hearing from the circles that I'm in is from too many brothers and sisters, mostly Black, but some other folks of color, who were facing this backlash for speaking out at the same time that white counterparts are being applauded. And if you haven't read the article, please check it out and share, because I need folks, particularly folks who are writing checks, to understand what our people are having to endure just to stay in this work. Yeah. And a couple of the examples that I used are a CEO who, after sending out one of the missives that every single organization from Bed Bath & Beyond to Nike to, whatever, sent out saying that Black Lives Matter, had a funder immediately say, "How dare you? This is so racially divisive. I support your organization because of education, not because of race. And I'm going to tell my 10 wealthy white friends, not only will you not get my money, but you won't get their money either." And that's real, like in writing and bold, and saying that this is true. So I'm giving that context because I need people to understand this has real implications. It's not just people being, having their feelings hurt because not everybody agrees with them or whatever. When you're talking about folks who are doing work in our communities to support and elevate, particularly education work on behalf of our young people, their families, our communities, and to have that compromise because they dare say that what is happening in our country and has been happening in our country since its beginning is unjust. To have that compromise, like, that's real. And so I think that I took one step to just try to elevate a conversation that I was having in back rooms with other Black and brown folks to hopefully get a level of consciousness around what sort of armor our folks are having to really shore up and wear every single day just to stay in this fight. Yeah, I think the danger, as you said, Tanisha, is if we're not careful, this will become the momentary knee-jerk reaction that happens to coincide with COVID, where everybody is staying inside and focused and there's no sports on TV and all the perfect storm things that made this bigger than what we've seen, in response to lots of other, Eric Gardner, for example. Right. If we're not careful, people will get away with this just being a moment, having a knee-jerk reaction of hiring a diversity officer or getting a consultant for a couple months. And I think part of the answer is we have to lean into those people who are already doing the work and have been doing the work. And we have to try to get money directly to them. Like, I always say, if you wanna find out what's really going on in any quote unquote movement, follow the money, who's controlling the money, and who's controlling the message.
That's good.
And in this case, we have to make sure that those things are controlled by those folks who are closest to where this work is really happening. And I'm happy to have co-conspirators across every kind of difference who are in the fight for the real reasons, but they got to cede control and know that they are there as visitors to help. But the real control is with our people who have been doing this work for decades.
That's so good.
Yes.
That's good.
Because you got to sit in that, especially again, as us trying to do this work. Like, I know when we were talking to Dr. Fuller, he was talking about how, he participated in a number of the civil rights movement demonstrations, and, he was hit with fire hoses, and, he fought dogs and all kind of stuff. And when you think about even today during the procession, they were saying that, John Lewis crossed Edmund Pettus Bridge one last time, and this time it was placed with rose petals and not blood. And so when we talk about what we're willing to sacrifice in this, and not just in this moment, but long term, for Black lives to really matter, like, I sit with that. Because I think about it to myself, like, damn, Tanisha, can you really go to jail? Because I'm scared to become somebody's bitch. Honestly, don't let the size fool you. Don't let the fact that I'm from Inglewood fool you. Somebody could probably bitch me in jail. I'm gonna fight as much as I can, but honestly, I ain't no thug. And so when we think about what we're willing to sacrifice, I think, we really need to sit with that as a people, because it's not just a little bit of time. It's, as Carmita said, is you can lose access to different rooms, you can lose your job, lose your livelihood, lose your life.
Right.
So what do y'all
So I gotta jump in on this. So the sacrifice, you can't even see what it is. You won't know what it is until it's already hit you. That's what this mission calls for. And so you have activists that will be pushing hard, and the next thing you know, they done got kicked out their house, lost their job. There's family issues going on, and family members getting fired because you didn't said something on somebody's television station. So I mean, it's endless. You can never predict what's going to happen. So you really got to be about the walk and the mission.
Yeah.
Well, my stance is, I think the NAACP said it many years ago, but don't talk about it, be about it. And, for so many people that are saying that they're about the movement, what are you sacrificing for the movement?
Right.
As an educator, when I was going through my issue with the state, when I talked to my daddy, he was like, okay, listen, when you take on the state, you already know, even if you win, or if you don't, they're not going to allow you back into the classroom until you do it the way that they want you to do it. And I said, well, I'm taking on the state, and I did just that. And to Neo's point, I don't think in that moment I was realizing what I was doing, because ultimately I was sacrificing my career, but I knew and I understood the importance of Black boys in particular, but many children of color, to have a male educator of color standing before them in the classroom. And so where it took me out of the classroom, it allowed 50 plus other male educators of color to stay in classrooms across the state. But there aren't a lot of people who think like that, because even close people to me were like, bruh, that's your bread and butter. Like, how you gonna take care of yourself? How you gonna pay your bills? What's going to happen next? And my mind was, well, I know I'm doing the right thing. So I got so caught up in doing the right thing that I wasn't worried about what was going to happen next, because that's the story. We've seen that in our ancestors. We've seen it in our own lives, that if we keep doing the work, things are going to get hard, but then they'll eventually get better. So, that's my point to it.
So I just gotta say, my mom used to say to me all the time, "It's not about you. It's not about you. It's not about you."
Yes.
I hated it. Like, I hate it, as you know. But I now, they say, like, you have to live your way to wisdom, right? Like, and I now understand. I now so understand what she was doing. And understand the brilliance and how that set me up to live my life the way that I do. Like you said, Jason, it's like, it's not about you. Like, if everything that you're building and standing on or whatever is about you, it will crumble. Like, it will. And I think, part of what just, in my response, Tanisha, to your question is like, we all have our own thresholds around what we're willing to sacrifice. Before we even got on, I was saying I struggle every day with whether or not I'm sacrificing enough, right? Like, I can say to myself, I can listen to other people wax poetic about how much I'm doing and how courageous I am, but it still doesn't feel like enough to me. It's never going to feel like enough. When you're a child of Birmingham, Alabama, you don't ever feel like you're doing enough. Like, yes, I'm sacrificing some big corporate paycheck I could have, but I'm not poor by any means, right? I'm sitting up here with everything that I need plus more. And so I struggle with that. I have to be honest, like, if whether or not I'm doing enough. But what I have chosen to do, and I say this all the time, is like, we got to recognize, and this is my last, well, it ain't the last thing I'll say, but I'll say we have to be prepared. If we, and I think about this from the surge perspective, but I also just think about it in my own being. If we are preparing folks to take the kind of risks, we know that they are going to fall. We know that they are going to lose jobs. We know that they are going to be attacked. So what I'm trying to do, and one of the things that I don't buy into legacy and all that other kind of stuff, but one of the things that I want to build is a trampoline. I don't want a safety net to catch my people. I want a trampoline. So when they inevitably fall because they came across the wrong status quo system, they upset the wrong person, not only do they not hit the ground, but they bounce back up. Because we see that happen for everyone else. Everyone else gets to fail. They get to do some wrong shit. They get to be sued. All of this stuff. And next thing we know, they're leading some other multi-million-dollar organization in another place in the country and getting other kind of support. And I see part of my call, I said I was going to get back to it. Part of my call is like, our people need that. Like when we are going up against a system that is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, some of us are inevitably going to be knocked down by that system. Right. And my job, I think, is to help create not just safety nets, but ways that we can bounce back up. Because and I'm saying a they, but it's a whole lot of days, rely on is us getting knocked down and not being able to get back up. And so I don't know if I'm doing enough. And I'm going to fight that every day of my life. And so I just have to be okay sitting with that dissonance. But I know that one thing that we can do, and it's why in that article I linked to a whole bunch of other Black and Brown organizations to say, hey, if y'all really about this, here's a whole list of folks that you could be donating to, because that's what we have to be in this for. If it's just about us individually, that's shaky ground. It's got to be about something that is going to lift all of us up. And that's how I sit with my dissonance.
Yeah. And I think it's important, I don't think any of us will feel like we're doing enough. Like I feel bad when I take self-care weekends, but I think the important thing is that people do what they can, and know what you can do. It's like, you just don't give, maybe a community service venture. And it's like, I did what I can. Like, no, you could do much more, but what's your capacity and what's your investment in Black lives, Black and Brown lives? But we are, y'all, a little over our hour. I wish we could continue this conversation, but we can't. So I just want to give y'all time to kind of wrap up with y'all closing thoughts, and we'll head on out.
I'll start by just saying right now, my wish for all of us is that we give ourselves and everybody around us some grace. Because, I said earlier, if we're really in this, when I say it's chess, not checkers, it really is the long game. It is the long game. And that means that we're going to choose to fight differently today than we will a week from now or a month from now. We're going to, argue with folks and call folks out that we're going to need a month or a year from now. So I think in all of this, we have to stay focused on what really matters. We have whatever your field, whether it's education, which is where, that's where my priority is. But if it's housing, if it's, health and wellness, whatever, like we got to stay focused, and we got to just give ourselves grace and give people around us grace and know that this is a long game. Like it was 400 plus years of building a system, and we are not going to dismantle it with one act, one statue coming down, one street being painted. So we can't, we should celebrate the little victories, but we got to acknowledge them for what they are.
Yes.
And we gotta know that this is a long game, and celebrate each other and give each other grace as we're going through it. That's my wish for all of us.
Yes.
That's good.
Neo, Jason?
I was looking at Neil like, did Neil want to go? But I'll go since I'm already talking. I would definitely say that, one of the things I heard earlier this morning was that we're 100 days out from the election, and, urging people to be empowered to vote, know the importance and why we're doing this act, to continue to support Black businesses, to continue to lift your voice against the educational system that's trying to bring back teachers and students too fast without having the resources needed to make sure that people can be safe. Don't just dwell in this moment, but make action in this moment. Our people, our communities are in need. Be mindful of the role that liberals and allies play. I think that Malcolm said it best that, the liberals are at war with the conservatives, and that's not by color or race. That's by the wealth system. And so we have to be mindful of that. So I just hope that we continue to stay vigilant and that we're not being pimped by the system again when so many of our people are suffering.
So I would say I'm still thinking about the Honorable Lewis, the Honorable John Lewis, who just passed. And I'm thinking about, what he would want for us to do. And I think it would be to, take that energy and continue to keep pushing for justice and for liberation for our people. And the word from Carmita, what she has said today is, we need to be unapologetic and we need to speak the truth, whether we get into circles or not. Because at the end of the day, our people are still in not so great of a situation. And the only way to get out of there is through the truth and through pushing hard. And so, and then also just affirming each other. Like, we need that positive energy. It's healthy. It helps us. It's a verbal massage. Everybody needs self-care. And that's the type of self-care that we gotta take. So that's what I want to leave everybody.
That's good.
I'm trying to gather my thoughts, but I'm really just stuck on this theme of leading while Blackity Black, and the first thing that comes to mind is not something that you just arrive at suddenly. It's an evolution, and it's a continuous evolution and journey. And one of my priorities in trying to lead while Blackity Black is to instill the values and the lessons that I've learned from, y'all, especially Carmita, into young people so that, we can have a sustained movement. And so I just, in honoring John Lewis and all the greats that have paved the way for us and sacrificed so much for us, made sacrifices that we don't have to make. I just want to honor them and continuing to lead in Blackity Black, not just Black, but Blackity Black. So thank you guys for everyone that's doing the work and doing the work authentically and unafraid to use their voice and push back against these systems. And, thank you as always to my brothers, my co-hosts, Neo and Jason and Carmita. Thank you so much. I can speak for the rest of Surge and, especially my fellows about how much you inspire us, and we aspire to make you proud. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your wisdom and talking that real shit with us. I know you probably got some more shit to talk. I know you ain't get it all out today. But
I'm raising my finger. I got my little church finger up. Just one little thing.
Go ahead.
Because we didn't say this explicitly, and I think it's so important.
Mm-hmm.
In this leading while Blackity Black thing, we got to get off of this, my Blackity judging your Blackity versus your Blackity,
right,
and like, which one is Black enough? We got to stop that.
Yes.
Because what I see happening is we talk about authenticity, but it's devolving into a conversation that's like, what mask of authenticity am I going to wear today, right? Mm-hmm. And the truth of the matter is, to lead authentically as your full Black self is about you and your values and your priorities and what matters to you. Sure. It's not about how your hair look, what kind of language or code switching you're doing, none of that. And what I hope for us is that we can, even with, conversations like this, recognize that we are a whole beautiful consortium of brilliance and genius that comes in all kind of packages with all kind of ideologies, all kind of different gifts, and ways of being in this work. And we, again, this just gets back to the distractions. When we allow ourselves to get distracted by these conversations of who who is Black, what does Blackity Black look like?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I encourage particularly our young people, like, lean into what that looks like for you. And do that authentically, do that unapologetically, do that without shame. And don't look, when they say when you're practicing yoga, they always say mind your pose. Because if you look at what anybody else is doing, right? If you're looking at anybody else, then you can't actually sit in the power of what you're doing. Right. So that's my closing thing. And I promise I'm done now, Tanisha. Thank y'all so much for having me.
That was awesome.
No, that was the whole last word.
Like
I don't know how to help you, Jesus, but thank you so much again. And this is Talk That Real Shit, y'all. We out of here. See y'all next Monday.